government. But beyond that, just all the federal workers. If these federal workers aren't working, well, all the places they go for lunch and for dinner and for, dropping off their dry cleaning and bringing their kids to daycares, all of that becomes at risk. And all of those surrounding businesses begin to fail because the number of employees in our state alone, 70,000 federal employees and 30,000 service members, that's a huge economic engine. So it's millions of dollars per day that's getting lost in our local economies because of those two classes of workers. Federal employees and service members are not getting paid. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have less than 72 hours left before our government shuts down, but Republicans in Congress have still failed to pass a funding bill. Instead, they're wasting time playing a game of political brinkmanship while the livelihoods of hardworking Americans hang in the balance. Over 70,000 federal employees and at least 30,000 service members live and work in New York State. Everyone from TSA agents and air traffic controllers, law enforcement officials, scientists, healthcare workers, childcare workers, all of these people would either be furloughed or forced to work without pay indefinitely if the government shuts down on Sunday. This could be devastating for our state. Kids could go hungry, troops won't get paid, and the work of the critical federal agencies that make sure our food and water are safe could go undone. More than 400,000 New Yorkers rely on special supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children. These families include nearly 330,000 infants and children. They could be at risk of losing critical food assistance in the event of a government shutdown. The Small Business Administration would not be able to issue new loans, while many small businesses would take hits to their revenue. New federal funds to help New York deal with asylum seekers would be delayed, as would disaster aid to address New York's recent storms. The shutdown would also limit food safety inspection by the Food and Drug Administration. It would impede the EPA from conducting drinking water inspections. It would curtail OSHA's ability to conduct workplace safety inspections. What's more, a government shutdown would have a huge effect on our national and state economies. According to the CBO, the 2018 to 19 government shutdown reduced economic output by $11 billion. In 2013, the government shutdown reduced GDP growth by $20 billion. This year, another shutdown could cost the US economy $6 billion per week. And in New York, that could translate to millions of dollars a day. Consumer confidence could fall while the federal deficit could grow. Families across the country could face financial uncertainty even as they continue to feel the effects of inflation and the pandemic. I've heard from families and federal employees across our state who say they can't afford to miss a single paycheck. They can't afford to lose their hard-earned salaries or have their federal benefits jeopardized. During the last government shutdown in 2018 to 19, we had people lining up at food banks in New York City just to put food on the table for themselves and their loved ones. TSA agents called out sick, flights were delayed, and some workers were forced to look for new jobs or ask their friends for money. We cannot afford to have this happen again. It's unnecessary and unacceptable, and the American people don't deserve it. We had a deal. And now House Republicans are going back on their word. We need to stop playing political games and put partisan politics aside. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy needs to reach across the aisle to Democrats. He needs to bring people together and do what needs to be done to keep our federal employees working and the government lights on. Happy to take questions.
Senator Pete Gillibrand from Channel 2 in Buffalo. A slightly off-topic question, although still dealing with families and dollars and cents. The COVID money for daycares will be expiring soon. You've introduced legislation to extend that. How viable do you think that is, and how much of a chance do you think that stands in getting through and providing money for those families that need it?
If so, if we have a shutdown, obviously nothing gets done, but this child care relief package could get included in a budget deal. And so I'm hoping that if we can get to the table, things like investing in child care to prevent this cliff could be part of that budget deal. There's money specifically for that program in the Senate version of the appropriations bill for that area of spending. So if we actually could have votes on the hard work that senators have done on a bipartisan basis to move our appropriations bills forward and ready to be voted on, if the House would match that, then we could actually protect against the child care cliff.
Senator, it's Marcia Kramer from CBS. I wondered if you could tell us what effect you think a shutdown would have financially on the local economy and the national economy, and especially on our financial services industry, which is so important to the economy of the state.
Well, as I mentioned, it would have a devastating effect on small businesses. First of all, they won't be able to get their SBA loans. If they're working on any federal financing at all of that gets put on hold. So that's just the financial services aspect of the federal government. But beyond that, just all the federal workers. If these federal workers aren't working, well, all the places they go for lunch and for dinner and for, dropping off their dry cleaning and bringing their kids to daycares, all of that becomes at risk. And all of those surrounding businesses begin to fail because the number of employees in our state alone, 70,000 federal employees and 30,000 service members, that's a huge economic engine. So it's millions of dollars per day that's getting lost in our local economies because of those two classes of workers. Federal employees and service members are not getting paid. And then last, it creates some of these safety net programs are jeopardized. And so, for example, if we're not giving resources for people under the SNAP benefit and nutrition assistance programs, they can't go shopping for food. So less revenue and money going into our food supply chain and into our grocery stores. So it's just absolute, the entire ecosystem of support that we give on a federal basis to New Yorkers is going to be shut off. So that's whether it's disaster aid, small businesses, or just the workers themselves, or safety net programs. It all means less money coming into New York.
But what about nationally? Does this affect us nationally in terms of the world, the way they look at us, and also our economic standing in the world as inflation could, be exacerbated?
Well, on a meta basis, it does. If you have government shutdown after government shutdown, the government, the rating agencies could downgrade U.S. debt. Like, it's something that's such a huge impact, but it could happen because when you don't function as a government and you don't do regular things, they will look at downgrading us. Like, it does affect our standing in the world because we're not functioning as a government.
Senator,
I think Moody's already issued a warning that said exactly that.
Senator, this is Juliet Papa from 1010 Wins. Good morning. My question is, what about the federal workers who are processing the migrants in New York? That they were sending additional federal workers to do some of the paperwork. Does that all stop? What happens?
I think because they're under DHS, they're critical workers. So they are designated as essential. So they'll continue to work because they're under Department of Homeland Security. It's also why we still get to have the air traffic controllers working and TSA still working, because they're all deemed essential workers. But it's going to affect travel because a lot of the training that happens and a lot of the support that goes under both FAA and TSA will not be there. And so if people, for example, are calling out sick, there's no one to replace them. It's what happened last time. So it's not going to be a good time to travel.
Can I ask an off-topic question? Are you taking those at this time?
Well, just make sure we're done with on-topic. Anybody else with on-topics?
Brian O'Neill, WLEA.
Go ahead.
On the Bath VA, I cover news for a couple of Bath stations. How will this the shutdown affect the Bath VA if it happens this weekend?
Well, the VA stays open. According to Secretary McDonough, in the case of a shutdown, there would be no impact on veteran health care. Burials would continue at the VA national cemeteries. VA would continue to process and deliver benefits to veterans, including compensation, pension, education, housing benefits, and the board will continue to process appeals. So we think the VA should be unharmed, but if those veterans are federal workers, they're not getting paid.
Thank you.
Senator Terry Frank in Jamestown.
Yep, go ahead.
Wanted to ask, because I did catch a little bit of Senator Schumer's comments on the floor just before your press conference here. And he mentioned that this is squarely on the shoulders of Kevin McCarthy. Do you share that view?
I definitely share that view. It's entirely up to him. We have done our appropriations process in the Senate. We have 12 appropriation bills ready to be voted on, which is also rare to have them be ready so timely. So we are ready. We are ready and waiting to negotiate. The one thing McCarthy's been unwilling to do is negotiate with Democrats, which is just a mistake on his part. And I think it's because he had to give away so much of his power when he was negotiating his speakership. And so the far right have a veto threat on almost everything that McCarthy is doing. And so he's listening to a handful of ultra conservative Republicans who don't care if the government shuts down.
Thank you.
Any more on topics? Okay, so we can go to off topics.
Great. Thank you, Senator Juliette Papa again. The caucus meeting is coming up this afternoon. What are your expectations at this meeting? And what do you expect to hear from Senator Menendez?
Well, the caucus meeting is also about the government shutdown. So we're going to get an update on where we are in negotiations with McCarthy. And I have no understanding of what Senator Menendez will say. So I will be there and we'll listen.
Is there some sort of vote that you take, or is this just
this is just a caucus meeting. It'll be as if any senator wanted to say a few words to the caucus, they are allowed to do that. But I think most of the meeting will still be about the government shutdown.
Senator, is Senator Menendez's vote on the government shutdown critical for the position that you guys are taking in terms of coming up with a deal? And is that one of the reasons why it's necessary to have him still in the conference?
No, right now, there's no vote in the Senate on any deal. So when that vote comes up, it'll be a bipartisan vote. So I don't think any one senator's vote is going to be very important.
Hi, Senator. This is Matthew Grady from Spectrum News. We're working a story today following the New York Fire Department deaths from 9/11 now being kind of the same as post 9/11 with post 9/11 related illnesses. I was wondering if you had any specific comments on just that number itself, and also if you think, what more needs to be done to advocate for first responders and others affected post 9/11 with all those illnesses.
Oh, I missed the first part of your question. Can you just repeat the first part?
Yeah. So with the recent news that post 9/11 illness related deaths by New York Fire Department members now eclipse the number of deaths by members that died on the day of 9/11.
Yes.
Do you have any specific comment on that? Yeah.
Yes. It's a very sad day. I mean, the fact that more firefighters have died since 9/11 than on 9/11, it shows how devastating these diseases are. And it shows how cruel and how severe they are. And so it's one of the reasons why I fight so hard for our 9/11 first responders and community members to get the health care that they deserve. And we were able to get in the defense bill an additional approximately $700 million to be added to the healthcare programs, because the cost of inflation has been, the cost of inflation for healthcare has been higher than any other item. And so we needed additional money to make sure the resources are there. We're going to keep fighting for more resources. We're going to do that this year, next year, the years to come. We're always going to fight for our first responders to make sure they have the healthcare they need for the rest of their lives. And so it's a struggle and a challenge that I'm always taking on, because it's so important to be there for them.
Senator Terry.
Go ahead.
Terry Frank in Jamestown again. Going back to the Senator Menendez situation, a growing number of your Democratic colleagues have come out and said he needs to resign. Do you share that view?
Yes, I gave a statement in New York. I think it was Monday. Senator Menendez has denied allegations, and he is seeking justice and due process through the criminal courts. However, I believe that the American people deserve members of Congress who put the people they represent first, not themselves. And I think these allegations are so serious that it's caused a real lack of trust. And given that, I agree with Senator Booker that he has to resign.
Senator, thank you.
Senator, could we just go back to the effect of a government shutdown? If
Yep.
there were a government shutdown, are there any estimates about how long it would last?
So the shutdown lasts based on how long it takes McCarthy to get a deal. So back to Senator Schumer's statement, this all rests on McCarthy's shoulders. He needs to work with the entire House of Representatives to reach a deal. And in my view, he should be working with Democrats, not his ultra right-wing Republicans, because it's not our problem that he gave them a veto threat over his speakership. He's supposed to be Speaker of the entire United States. He's supposed to represent the entire country. So he should be working with Democrats to come up with a bipartisan, common sense budget. He already made a deal with the president that he's going back on, which is an outrage in and of itself. So he should be working with Democrats to a bipartisan deal, and we can take up whatever deal he reaches. The Senate is already in a place where they are ready to vote on a bipartisan basis on all things. So we stand ready to keep the government open. It's just been a deep disappointment that he has no control over his caucus and that he's not serving the whole country.
Senator, just a follow-up to that. There's something called the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress that's made up of 32 Democrats and 32 Republicans, and they have come up with a proposal that they think could get bipartisan support. Is that something that you think that the Senate could endorse as well, as part of a continuing resolution? Or
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate process. I think that having the Problem Solvers Caucus, those 32 Democrats working with 32 Republicans, is exactly how they should be governing in the House. And we would look at anything that the Problem Solvers Caucus and that the Congress did on a bipartisan basis and review it on its merits and make a decision. But that's exactly what governing looks like. Any other questions? Well, thank you everyone for participating, and we'll keep you up to date as we get more information on the shutdown. We can hold another call if we get any breakthroughs.